Hi, and welcome to the fourth video in the income maintenance module. This video is going to take a look at some common housing-related income assistance issues and how you can help a client who's dealing with them. In this video, we'll cover benefits offered by Ontario Works that might be available to a client who's moving to a new home. Then we'll take a look at how clients with different housing situations might be able to get support from the programs, including homeless clients, someone who's in an interval or transition home, and someone who's living with their parents. The last thing we'll cover is home visits from Ontario Works or ODSP, and how you can help a client who receives a visit from their caseworker. Let's start by taking a look at how someone might be able to get extra financial help if they're moving to a new home. If you have a client on Ontario Works who's moving to a new place, there are a few additional allowances that you should remind them to speak to their caseworker about. The first is a new residence payment, which Ontario Works can provide to someone who's setting up a new place of living. The second is funding for deposits, including things like rent deposits or fuel and hydro deposits. Another option that might be available is funding for moving expenses, including for things like moving furniture and their personal belongings. The last additional amount that might be available to a client who's moving is funding for essential household items, if they need to be replaced or repaired. This kind of extra funding is provided at the discretion of Ontario Works, but if you have a client who's moving and needs additional financial help, you should remind them to contact their caseworker to see if they might be eligible for any of these benefits. If your client does request one of these benefits and is denied, they can dispute that decision, but you should refer them for legal advice if they want to do that, and make sure they bring their notice of decision, if they have it. Now let's take a look at how clients with different housing situations might be able to get support from Ontario Works or ODSP. Let's start with someone who's homeless. Ontario Works and ODSP can't refuse to give someone income assistance just because they don't have a permanent address. But the programs won't give any money towards shelter support if someone isn't paying for housing. Someone who's homeless might still be able to get a loan or other rent supports though, for things like first and last month's rent, from rent banks or other institutions, or even from the programs as an additional allowance, without affecting or reducing the support amounts they already receive. So if you have a client who this might apply to, you should refer them to a caseworker for more information. Now let's take a look at someone living in an interval or transition home for abused women. If you have a client who's staying in an interval or transition home, but still keeping their home in the community, they're still eligible to receive their full income support for at least the first 3 months that they spend in the home. After those first 3 months, their income support might be reduced, but they should still receive some money for basic needs, for themselves and for any family members who are staying in the home with them. If your client isn't keeping their home in the community, they can still get a reduced amount of basic needs support, unless they're getting money from somewhere else. And if they make changes to their housing in the community while they're in the home, their shelter support payments might be adjusted, but they should still get some money for basic needs. If you have a client who's staying in an interval or transition home, you can help them contact their caseworker to let them know about their change in circumstance and confirm their continued eligibility for support. If they have any issues after they talk to their caseworker, you should refer them for legal advice. And if that client was previously living with someone who receives ODSP, but they aren't eligible for the program on their own, you can help them start their own application for Ontario Works. The last type of housing situation we'll cover is someone who's living with a parent. Someone living with their parent is not usually eligible for income assistance because they aren't considered financially independent. But Ontario Works does have some exceptions to this rule, like if they already live with a spouse, if they're a parent and have custody over their child, if they have a post-secondary degree or diploma, if they've been out of school for more than 5 years, if they're over 18 and lived away from their parents for more than 2 years, or if they're eligible as a sole support student under OSAP or the First Nations Post-Secondary Funding Program. These are just a few common exceptions, but there are others, and if your client is living with their parents and wants to get assistance from Ontario Works, you can help them contact the program office to ask about their eligibility. If they're denied assistance after they apply, they can dispute that decision if they want to, but you should refer them for legal advice and remind them to bring their notice of decision, if they have it. The last thing we'll cover is home visits. Someone who's receiving income support from Ontario Works or ODSP, or even just applying for support from either program, can be visited at home unannounced. This means that a caseworker can come to your client's home, with or without notice, at any point during regular business hours. If this happens, your client does have a right to refuse to let the worker in. But if they do refuse and they don't have a valid reason, their support can be canceled. A valid reason would include things like if someone in the home is sick, if the visit would interfere with a religious practice, or if someone has visitors over and they don't want them to know about their income support. If you're speaking with a client who tells you that a caseworker visited them unexpectedly and they refuse to let them in, you should warn them that their support might be canceled because of it. You can ask them about the reasons why they refused, and if they believe it was for a valid reason, you can help them contact their caseworker to explain the circumstances. If your client's support is canceled because of the refused home visit and they want to dispute the decision, you should refer them for legal advice. And just like that, we've wrapped up housing issues and income maintenance. Until next time.